Hello everyone, we are from Group 3 and in this video, we will discuss the Romanticism era and its social and cultural aspects and also famous literary works during the era. The Romanticism era is a movement that started approximately in the late 18th century and ended in the mid-19th century. This era happened after the Enlightenment period, around the time when the French Revolution ended, and around the same time as the Industrial Revolution occurred. Thus, the social, cultural, as well as literary aspects of life in the Age of Romanticism were greatly impacted by these major historical events. In this era, nature was a major theme in literary works. Some famous prolific writers are William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and Percy Shelley. Romanticism versus Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a philosophical movement in the 17th and 18th century that focused on science and rationality as the proper way to understand the world, contrary to the previous era, the Dark Ages, which emphasized religion. Enlightenment believed that humans are capable of more and that they could improve everything. However, Romantic thinkers defy this movement where reason was overemphasized. They think that the Enlightenment movement only created an oppressive and conformist society that rejects human attributes such as emotions, creativity, and expression. Before we address further about Romanticism, let's take a look at the revolutions that happened around the time. Industrial Revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, massive change that focused on technology occurred. New machines which used fuel as their power source were invented. The factory system was developed and so the labor division increased. These changes allow mass production and tremendous use of natural resources. Transportation and communication were also greatly impacted by the improvement of science and technology. Of course, industrialization also affects society. In England, where it all started, the population were rapidly increasing due to urbanization. This eventually caused the lower class to live in a horrible living condition as the facilities, like decent housing and public health, couldn't keep up at the same rate. Furthermore, labor workers were paid low wages, especially when they don't have a special skill, even with the heavy and dangerous workload. However, with the middle and upper class view that work equals success, this industrial society brought new problems such as economic egoism, soulless individualism, and materialism. The unfairness faced by the working class was voiced in protest, which resulted in the establishment of the labor union. American and French Revolution. While England was undergoing the start of the Industrial Revolution, America declared its independence from the Great British Empire in 1775. The Revolutionary War ended after the US won the year-long battle against Britain with the help from the French military. In France, however, with the extravagant spending of the royalties that almost led to bankruptcy, and the decades of tyranny and inequality faced by the people, France had their own revolution starting from 1789. The fall of King Louis XVI marked the end of absolute monarchy and the establishment of democratic government in France. The rise of the Third Estate, or ordinary people, non-nobility, changed the stance of equality and individual rights of the citizens in the country. In a way, the American and French Revolution can be considered as the Romantic ideals. Emphasis on individualism, emotions, and freedom were the focal points of Romanticism. The revolution happened because they wanted a change for a better life. The sudden change of politics affects practically everybody in the society, and the people finally feel some sort of freedom after being oppressed for so long. The French Revolution specifically had a significant influence on several writers of the Romantic period. Most writers were in approval of the revolution as it is the beginning of improved life for civilized society. William Wordsworth wrote about his experience living in France during the Revolution period. Quoted from his poem The Prelude, "Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven." However, when the revolution turned into bloodshed, aka the Reign of Terror, his youthful imagination and enthusiasm grew cold, hence his turning into nature.
Moving on to the literature. Before we address some of the notable writers and their works, let's have a look at the major characteristics which are featured in Romantic literature. Characteristics. First of all, nature. Nature was a major theme in literary works. Romantics view nature as something pure, uncorrupted, and almost spiritual. Therefore, Romantic works idealize natural and social aspects of life and physical aspects of nature because the old days were seen as a better life. Nature became a symbol of life without society, a truly good life. Romantic writers describe their expression by using nature as symbolism and imagery. They believe that nature, with its infinite beauty, can ultimately convey their feelings. Second, emotion and feeling. Literary works in this era possess profound aspects of humanity because emotion and feeling are also considered to be the main priority. Romantic writers focus on describing feeling and emotion in all forms, such as love, fear, sorrow, grief, loneliness, and many more. Acceptance and self-awareness of emotion are the main intention of Romanticism literary works, which makes them readable and relatable. Third, supernatural and spiritual elements. Other than nature, some literary works also feature supernatural and spiritual elements. The Romantics think that they should not turn away from the mystery beyond the physical world. The writers treat that aspect to explore the contrast of life and death, serving as the representation of dark emotions such as guilt, depression, loss, and so on. Fourth, imagination. Imagination is also one of the most important characteristics and plays a huge role in shaping literary works that we know until today. Imagination appeared as a result of the Enlightenment movement's arrival. As the movement impacts the era so badly, the Romantic thinkers used their creativity and imagination to see the world differently. Imagination is seen to be a dynamic and active power with many functions. Therefore, many literary works depend on the power of creativity and imagination. Last but not least, Romantic hero. Just like any other type of literary works, Romanticism artworks also have a signature protagonist called the romantic hero. A romantic hero is often described as someone who either rejects the social norms or is rejected by society. They suffer life circumstances under the pressure of society, which explains their introversion and isolation. The impact of social rejection leads them to have a feeling of wanderlust. They often set up their quest for self-discovery. The thoughts of the character become the primary focus instead of the hero's action, revealing their inner perception. Romantic hero commonly regrets his action from the past, a person with self-criticism. They become victims of their rebellious tendencies starting from their youth to their deaths. Famous writers and literary works. William Wordsworth. Wordsworth is one of the founders or central figures of Romantic literature. He is also one of the famous authors who often puts nature elements inside his remarkable works, for example, The Prelude. Wordsworth's greatest work, The Prelude, is a long autobiographical poem which was in its earliest version known only as the Poem to Coleridge. It is a work that the poet labored over during most of his long life. Generally, he wrote about nature and the common man, and the relationship between the two. Second, Daffodils. First published in 1807, this is perhaps one of his most famous works with its famous initial line, I wandered lonely as a cloud.
I wandered, lonely as a cloud, that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils.
Wordsworth's intention in glorifying nature is noticeable in both poems, as he believes that emphasis on nature shows a good relationship between nature and humans. It helps individuals to develop their intellectual and spiritual development. Also, he believes that the wondrous nature could purify man's thoughts and enrich man's spirit. Therefore, he is often called the poet of nature. Samuel Taylor Coleridge. A friend of Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge was an English poet, critic, and philosopher. He also contributed to literary works in the Romanticism movement. His famous poems are Kubla Khan and Christabel, both published in 1816, and The Rime of the Ancient Manner, published in 1798. Both William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge were credited with the founding of the Romantic movement in England. The two friends wrote poetic works which were then composed into a collection of poetry entitled Lyrical Ballads, published in 1798. It is an influential piece which laid emphasis on emotion and glorification of nature, outlining the romantic theory of poetry. John Keats. John Keats is one of the prominent English poets in the second generation of the Romantic era. His odes, Ode to a Nightingale and Ode on a Grecian Urn, were considered to be his well-known works, and it is written in praise and dedication of something or someone that he admires. Typical romantic quality can be seen in most of his works as he emphasizes extreme emotion through natural imagery. For example, the poem entitled To Autumn.
Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd, and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease.
Even after his death, his poems and letters remain popular and continually read and analyzed until today. Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was one of the female novelists who wrote the classic famous Gothic novel, Frankenstein. It has become a massive piece of work which inspires many theatrical shows and movie adaptations. Despite having science fiction aspects in the story, Frankenstein still embodies romanticism through values which Mary Shelley puts in. It is shown in the main character, Victor Frankenstein, who possessed the romantic qualities and ideals of imagination and innovation. And also the vivid imagery of nature helps solidify Frankenstein as one of the greatest romantic novels during its era. Even though the Age of Romanticism ended with the coronation of Queen Victoria, marking the initial year of the Victorian movement, the Romantics poetry, novels, and other kinds of literature still remain inspiring modern literature until today.
Thou already tried to use that line of argument when the Jews wanted to kick your ass after the Merchant of Venice.
We doth not purchase it, Slick Willie. We doth not purchase it.
Be calm, my good lords. 'Twill not be long before another black hero graceth the stage, and now, if you let me take my leave of you.
Not so fast.
Thank you for your attention. If you are interested to know more about the Age of Romanticism, feel free to drop your thoughts and questions in the comment section below.